from Easter Sunday morning. So, let's open our Bibles to the book of Acts chapter 17. Trust me, I have a plan. Acts chapter 17. This is a great story in Acts 17 that tells us all about Easter. It's Paul preaching to the people in Athens. Starts in verse 16. Let me read it for you. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know this new teaching that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean." All these Athenians and all the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that you are in every way very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by human hands, as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead." Well, when they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered. But others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." At that, Paul left the council. Some of the people believed and became followers of Paul. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, and also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. Let's stop there for a moment and pray. Lord, how we thank you that you have moved in us, that you have not left us without the truth. And now I pray that we would hear your word and that it would touch us deeply. How we thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking that I've got it wrong. It's Easter Sunday morning, and here I am reading out of Acts. There's no Easter Sunday morning in Acts. Now, John 20 that I read earlier, now that would be okay. But here I am it's Easter Sunday morning. I'm not supposed to preach out of Acts in Easter Sunday morning. I'm supposed to preach about the resurrection of Christ, right? You're probably thinking to yourself, come on, Pastor Troy, those aren't the kinds of stories we talk about on Easter Sunday morning. On Easter Sunday morning, we talk about the empty tomb. On Easter Sunday morning, we talk about this man, Jesus, who came as no other man, claiming to be the Son of God. We talk about how this man, Jesus, went around and healed the sick and cleansed the lepers and mourned with those who mourned and rejoiced with those who rejoiced. We talk about this man, Jesus, who is not a religious leader. Oh, how the world wants to call him a religious leader, but he wasn't a religious leader. Matter of fact, he couldn't stand the religious leaders of the day. He went into the biggest religious center of the day, the temple in Jerusalem, and he threw the religious leaders out. He said this is supposed to be a place of prayer for all nations, a place where anyone from anywhere, any language, any background, any past, any future can come and bow before the God of all there is and worship and know Him. But he said, you, religious leader, have made it a den of robbers. You're doing everything you can to keep people from God instead of allowing Him in. Now there's a story we should tell on Easter Sunday morning, and we should talk about how Jesus sat with His disciples around the table, the Passover table that they had celebrated for years. And He said, I'm going to teach you something new. And He picked up that bread and He said, this bread, this unleavened bread, striped and pierced and pure, represents my body. And then with His own hands, He broke it and He said, I'm breaking my body for you. And then He picked up the covenant, the cup of the covenant that had been the cup representing the blood of bulls and rams that had sealed the old covenant. And He said, no, this is a new covenant. Sealed not in the blood of animals, but sealed in my own blood, an eternal covenant for you. And maybe as I'm preaching about that, I should tie that back to Isaiah 53. Now, there would be a good sermon. Tie that back to the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, and how by His stripes we're healed, and about how He was pierced for our transgressions, even though He was pure and without sin, how His body was broken for us and His blood was spilled for us. Maybe I should tell that story, that sermon on Easter Sunday morning. And maybe I should talk about how even one of His own, one who had been closest to Him, Judas Iscariot, maybe I should talk about how he turned away from God, didn't understand, rebelled and walked away, and had no second chance. And how even though we have rebelled and walked away, we can have a second chance. And maybe I should talk about how the religious leaders of the day hated Jesus and said, we will not have Him be king over us. We will not have Him rule over us. This one who claims to be God in the flesh, we will not have Him rule over us. Away with Him. Crucify Him. And maybe I should talk about how each one of us in our life has done the same thing and said, we will not have Christ rule over us. Away with Him. And maybe I should talk about how Barabbas was sentenced to die that day. There was a cross made for Barabbas to be crucified between two of his cronies, two of the thieves that worked with him. This man who was a murderer, who was an admitted guilty murderer, sentenced to be crucified that morning, his cross prepared, but at the last minute Jesus stepped in and was crucified in his place and took his guilt and his punishment. Well, Barabbas went free. And maybe I should talk about how Jesus has done this for every one of us who are sentenced to death, but He has stepped in and taken our death. Now there would be a good one. Maybe I should preach that sermon on Easter Sunday morning. Or maybe I should just talk about Jesus on the cross and what He endured for us and the things that He said. And maybe I should tie it back into Psalm 22 that explains the whole thing ahead of time. But I shouldn't leave you hanging. I should end with the empty tomb. The fact that it wasn't over, that new life is available because Christ rose from the dead. Now that'd be a good Easter sermon. Not Acts chapter 17. Did you hear anything about soldiers in Acts 17? But here's the deal. I was thinking about it this week as I was preparing for this, and I thought, you already know all those stories. I mean, even if you haven't been to church in years, if you went to Sunday school, you know those stories. Even if you just kind of grew up in America and bumped into them from time to time, you know enough of those stories to have heard this. And for those of you who've been involved the last few weeks, you've not only heard all of these stories, but you know that this isn't just some fanciful thing. You have learned that this is absolute historical fact. That every bit of it is rooted in history, that there's more evidence for the resurrection of Christ than any other historical fact from that period or any period close to it. We know for a fact that these things happened. You know the stories, and you know they're true. And there is tremendous value in telling you these stories again. But I thought, you already know these stories. You've already heard them. So maybe, I thought, maybe what you'd rather me do is talk about the Ark of the Covenant. Dig back into some Jewish history. Now, I have told you all that for every New Testament story, there is an Old Testament picture. I've told you guys that for every New Testament thing that happened, there's some sort of something in the Old Testament that points to it all the way through. And probably one of the best pictures of the resurrection is the Ark of the Covenant. This box, this gold box that was 3 feet long by 18 inches wide by 2 feet deep. It was made by the Israelites as they came out of Egypt. It was wood overlaid in gold. Inside of it was the 10 Commandments, which was the people's obligation to God. And inside of it was a jar of manna and Aaron's rod, God's obligation to the people. That he would be their leader, that he would provide for them, that he would take care of them step by step every day, watching out for them, protecting them. And their obligation to him was that they would be his people and behave like the children of God. And so the people agreed to this covenant, and it was put in this box, and on the top of the box was a lid. The lid was made of wood overlaid in gold, and cast gold on top of that were 2, we call them cherubim. They were heavenly beings. We don't have a better word for them. They were just 2 kind of heavenly beings, one on one side, one on the other, facing each other. And in between the 2 angels on the top of the box was what was called the mercy seat. And this is where it gets really cool. This ark, this box, was put into the tabernacle, or eventually the temple, in a room called the most holy place. The outer room, priests went into that all the time to change the showbread, to offer the prayers of the people on the altar of incense. But there was this inner room called the most holy place that was marked off with a big curtain. And only once a year did anyone go in there. Only once a year, on a day called Yom Kippur, it means literally Day of Atonement, the high priest, only the high priest, would go in past that big curtain and stand before the Ark of the Covenant at the mercy seat. Now, this high priest had some really fancy clothes. They were made of all different kinds of wool that were dyed in different colors and woven together. The most fanciful garment of all of Israel belonged to the high priest. And he would wear that while he worked. And they were in the Middle East, and it was made of wool, and there were lots of layers to it. You can imagine how hot that was, and he would sweat while he worked. God said on the Day of Atonement, on Yom Kippur, he will not wear that garment. No, he will wear linen, lightweight, thin linen. Just a simple, plain garment. He will humble himself before all the people and wear the garment of a slave. And he won't be too hot, and he won't sweat. Because the work is done, you see, on the Day of Atonement. He's not doing any work. And on the Day of Atonement, what the priest will do, they'll have a big sacrifice outside, and they'll get the blood of the sacrifice in a bowl, and he will take this bowl into that Holy of Holies inner chamber, that most holy place, and he'll stand before the mercy seat, and he will ask forgiveness from God. Because you see, the people knew that they had not kept up their end of the agreement. They knew what their end of the agreement in that covenant was, and they knew that they hadn't kept it up, but they knew that God had kept up his. And they had heard that if they didn't keep up their end of the agreement, God had every right to just zap them right off of the face of the earth. But they didn't want God to do that. They needed his forgiveness. And so this one day a year, the high priest would go in with the blood, and he would ask the forgiveness of God, and he would take his fingers and dip it in the blood and sprinkle some on that mercy seat, as though he's saying, Lord, I know that we deserve to die and bleed for what we have done, but something else has died and bled in our place, and will that be good enough? And they knew it wasn't good enough. They had to continually do this again and again and again. They knew it was just substitution. They knew it was nothing but the mercy of God that would give them forgiveness. Not because of anything they had done, but just because God was so merciful. Interestingly enough, they tied a rope around the high priest's left leg when he went in there. And the reason they did that was because if the high priest was not ceremonially pure, or said or did something wrong while he was in there, or even worse, if the sacrifice had not worked, if God had not received the sacrifice and they were not forgiven as a people, the high priest would die right there in front of the mercy seat of God. He's dead. They had little bells on the bottom of his robe, and if the bells quit ringing, they knew he'd fallen down dead, and they just pull him out. And they weren't forgiven. All of the people would wait outside the temple, crowded around in the courtyard outside the temple, while the high priest went in and sprinkled the blood on the mercy seat, and they would wait for him to come out. And when he would come out, he would holler out one Hebrew word. He would just cry out in joy this one Hebrew word, and the word literally means, it is all forgiven. He would come out and he would say, it is all forgiven, and the people would cheer, and they would begin to praise their God. They could now have relationship with their God, you see, because of what he did on Yom Kippur. And it would be a great sermon if I would tie that right into John chapter 20, because here's what happened in John chapter 20. Peter and John come, they see the empty tomb. Mary stays. Mary loves Jesus. Love endures all things. She's willing to stay at an empty tomb. She looks into the empty tomb, and what does she see? An angel on that stone slab, the shape of a coffin. One angel on one side, one angel on the other, facing each other. In between them, on that stone slab, is the sprinkled blood of Christ from his broken body on that stone slab. And they say, why are you crying? He's not in here anymore. He's come out, you see. It worked. All is forgiven. Don't you see? Go and tell the disciples. You can now have relationship with your God. It worked. All is forgiven. Oh man, that would be a tremendous Easter sermon. And you might not have heard about the Day of Atonement before. Most of you have. But you might not have heard about that before. You might not have realized that connection before, but that really doesn't change anything. You've heard the story. I mean, I'm looking around the room. Most of us grew up in Sunday school. Some of us didn't. You've heard the story. You know that all is forgiven because Jesus rose from the grave. That he was the perfect sacrifice. That now we can have relationship with our God. And so as great of a sermon as it is, you've heard this one before. Maybe what you would have me do is go back even further into the very Garden of Eden, Genesis chapter 3, where there was a tree. God had made man and woman, and he made them simply for the purpose of enjoying life with him. He would come every evening and walk with them in the cool of the evening, and they would just enjoy time together. Just be in relationship together. And they never had any need because he just took care of them. And if they ever had any questions, oh, how he would love to teach and bring them along and answer and grow them up in wisdom. It was just absolutely perfect. We call it paradise. It was a perfect situation, not because the garden was so beautiful, but because God was there with them. And they had a close connection with him. And there was no deep, hollow need in their hearts. He just was for them. And in the garden, in order to make it perfect, it had a couple of trees in there, fruit-bearing trees, and one was called the tree of life. And if they stayed and ate from the tree of life, they would live with him this way forever. Even if their physical bodies should expire, they would live this way with him forever. And also in the garden, there was something called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Because you see, they weren't forced to walk with God. It was a choice they made. They loved him. And love only works when it's a choice. Love, by definition, requires choice. And so they had the choice. He said, listen, this tree of the knowledge of good and evil, well, that's poison, you see. If you eat that, you will experience evil. Evil is death, complete separation from God, breach of relationship. If you eat from that tree, that's what's going to happen. Oh, you know this story. That old serpent came. I don't think he came just one time. I think he came many times, time after time after time, and spoke to them. You guys really should try this. Evil's not that bad. You guys really should try this. You know, he told them, the reason that God doesn't want you to eat from this tree is because he doesn't want you to have any fun. God is just a cosmic killjoy. And I'm telling you what, he says, this fruit is not only beautiful, it's incredibly tasty. And if you don't eat from it, you're never going to experience that. And not only that, he said, if you eat from this tree, you're going to learn some things. You're going to be wise. You'll be wiser than God, who doesn't know evil, he said to them. And eventually, Eve believed. what the serpent was saying, and wanted that beautiful thing for herself, and wanted to experience its flavor for herself, and wanted to be wise. And so she took some fruit and ate it, and I could just punch Adam because he's standing there the whole time, and he didn't do anything about it. He just took what she gave him, and he ate it too. And on that day, they experienced death. We think death is when the body quits working, but real death happens the moment we're separated from God. Many people are walking around this world deader than a doornail. Their heart might be working, their lungs might be functioning, but they're dead. They have no real life. And there's this deep emptiness inside of them that they try to fill with all kinds of other things. And they try to be busy enough not to notice it, but it rots away at them. And I have talked to these people as they have approached the end of their life. And they have told me what a waste it all has been. And they know that they're dead. These people experienced death that day when they were separated from God. And since then, we humans have dedicated all of our time, all of our energy, and all of our resources to getting back into relationship with God. This is where all these false religions come from. Oh, there's people who believe if you climb a high mountain in the Himalayas with a special colored cloth and you clip it to a string so that the wind can flap that, then somehow your deep, deep need will approach God there in the wind. There are people who believe that if they wear the right clothes and they say the right things and they go to the right places and they do the right things, that somehow they'll be pleasing to God and be able to come back in relationship with Him. There are people who believe that if they bow before God and say, I am your slave, and they bow before God the right way on the right days at the right times again and again and again, saying that they're the slave of God again and again and again, then maybe eventually He'll receive them and say that somehow they're good enough. We have been giving everything we can to get back in relationship with God. And it's not just through religion. Oh, we have tried to get back into relationship with God through science so much, trying to understand more and more about the universe. And when we realized that wasn't going to get us back into relationship with God, we decided that maybe we're God. Since we know all this about science, we must be smart enough. We can be our own God. And since we're our own God, now we've started this process of self-worship, trying to satisfy ourselves in some way, bowing before what we think is best. Making myself feel good. Got to love yourself, you know. Got to be true to yourself. And all the time, this hole in our lives from this broken relationship continues. And people try more and more things to satisfy, and none of it works. But you see, there's a third tree in the story that I could be telling you on Easter Sunday morning. And that's the cross. Jesus came and said, listen, you guys are never going to fix this. You're never going to fix this. And so I, God, have come to fix it for you. What you deserve for your rebellion, for worshiping yourself, well, you just deserve to be with yourself forever now, don't you? What you deserve for turning away from God is to just be without God forever now, don't you? You deserve death. But He said, listen, I'll die for you. I'll take your death. He who had no sin, who deserved no death, who had never rebelled, I'll take your sin. I'll die for you so that you have a chance at life. And then, of course, the beautiful thing is that He did not stay dead. We know it. Historical fact. We talked about it earlier. Easter Sunday morning, He walked out of that tomb and He came and said, listen, I have got a whole new kind of life for you. If any of you will follow me out of that tomb of your old existence, you will receive a new kind of life. You will be a brand new creature, born again into something completely new, not physical, much more than that. Something that starts now and goes on for eternity. You can have that. You can have that relationship with God that the depth of your heart has been longing for, that you've been trying to satisfy with other things. You can have that. Because I'm alive now, He said. And now that would be a really good Easter sermon. That'd be a pretty good one. But Mike heard this the other day when he was up in the youth group. hanging out with the teenagers, we talked about it. And I know that many of you have heard it as well. And here's the thing. Some of you have heard this and have said, that's it, I'm in. 100%. But most people who have heard these stories over and over and over again, I don't know, it just doesn't seem to make any difference. I don't understand that. And so I thought about Acts chapter 17, and I thought about Paul there in Athens. You know, Athens was a city a lot like ours. I mean, we didn't have cool buildings and stuff like that like Athens did. But we have the same people. They had some people there who were just trying to get through the day. They were just, we would call them hourly wage earners. They were just trying to do their job and pay their bills and go on about their day and hope that nobody messed with them. They had people there that were trying to raise their children the best that they could, to be good people, honest people, contributing to society. They had people there that were trying to be educated and to educate the next generation, to know the things that needed to be known so that they could be a good people and a good society. And they were led by thinkers, Epicurean and Stoic philosophers that Luke points out for us in the book of Acts. They were led by thinkers who sat around all day trying to figure out the truth, and anything that they figured out that they thought might be truth, they shared with the people to affect them. That sounds a lot like our city. And as Paul walked around the city, he saw that they were very religious, because they had little shrines all over throughout the city. Every street corner had a little shrine to something that they thought might help to satisfy this deep need that we had. And that's exactly like us. Oh, we don't have shrines. Oh, yeah, we do. Look around. We have shrines to education all over this town. We spend so much of our money sacrificing to education, because if we can just be educated enough, smart enough, if we can just learn enough, we'll be able to learn ourselves out of this hole that humanity's gotten itself into. I kind of like Star Trek. Do you like Star Trek? I know Addie likes Star Trek. That show is built on that premise, that somehow people became smart enough that they evolved past war and hunger and poverty and sickness and disease. If we can just contribute enough, if we can just sacrifice enough to education, then we'll be fine. We have shrines to athletics all over this town. If we can just be healthy enough, strong enough, physically mature enough, if we can just kick that ball right enough, well, then we'll be fulfilled and satisfied, and the deepest longings of our hearts will come true. We have shrines to material goods all over this town. If we can just have a little bit bigger, a little bit nicer house, a little bit newer car that starts up a little faster and doesn't break down as often, if we can just have a little nicer furniture, a little better TV, some nicer clothes, a fancier watch, well then that'll satisfy. That'll satisfy this deep need. If I can just have a little bit more, if I can just do a little bit better. We have shrines to money. If I can just make the right investments, if I can just earn the right amount, if I can just have the right kind of retirement. Listen, I'm willing to work my whole life to get to that point of retirement, and if I can just have the right amount when I get there so that I can do whatever I want, travel the world, go wherever I want, drive whatever I want, date whoever I want, well then I'll be in good shape. I will be satisfied. And we have many, many more. We have shrines to a variety of different kinds of chemicals. We have shrines to a variety of different kind of dating opportunities. We have shrines to a variety of different kind of relationship opportunities, even in our pockets on our phones. And like Paul saw in Athens, I'm pretty convinced that most of us, somewhere in our life, have a shrine to the unknown God. Because you see, we know that all this stuff we're getting into isn't going to be enough. It's not going to take care of it. It doesn't matter how nice the house is and how shiny our Bentley is and how pretty our girlfriend is. It doesn't matter. We're still going to be short. No matter how well we can kick the ball, no matter how many degrees we have, it's still not going to be good enough. And so we leave some space so that if we finally discover the thing that is good enough, we're ready to invest in that as well. Paul walked around the city of Athens. He hadn't planned on going there and preaching. He was going there for a little bit of a break. But Paul walked around the city of Athens brokenhearted. These poor people have no idea that Christ has taken their death and now they can have life. And so they're still in the midst of death trying to dig their way out of it. And he began to tell them, Christ is risen and you can have life. And they thought, wow, this is pretty cool. And so they took him to a place called the Areopagus. This was the center of the city, high up on the hill, Mars Hill, overlooking the city, where all of the finest minds of the day met to determine culture. They took him up onto the Areopagus and they said, some people have been saying you got some pretty interesting ideas, and we'd like to hear them. And so Paul laid down, we read a shorthand version of it. Paul laid down what is commonly known as the best sermon ever preached. He explained to them the connection between the hole in their hearts and the Christ who could fill it. He explained to them the reason that they were facing death, the reason they feared death, the reason they were never satisfied, the reason it just never came together for them, the reason they never had enough, the reason they worshiped all of these things and none of them did them any good, and they continued to strive for more and more and more and never reach it. He explained it to them beautifully. And then at the end of that, he said, listen, God has come as a man. Emmanuel, God with us. We call him Christ, the Messiah. He's come. He's come to save you from that. He's come to save you from that struggle in your life that eventually ends in nothing. He's come to save you from being stillborn in this life, spending this entire physical existence trying to get ready for something that you are not ready for and you die. He's come to save you from that. He's come to save you from the struggle of daily existence and into something so beautiful that starts now in this life and goes on forever. And he proved it, Paul said. He proved it by rising from the dead. He proved it. Now listen, pause for just a moment. They could look into the journals of the day and discover that what Paul said was absolutely true. It did happen just like Paul said. Everything that Jesus had said, everything that Jesus had done, it happened just like he said. And he died on the cross under Pontius Pilate, and he rose again on the third day, Sunday morning after Passover. They could look it all up, and Paul said he proved it this way. There is no denying it. He proved everything I've just said to you by rising from the dead. I think, in my mind, he probably told them the same three stories I didn't just tell you a few minutes ago. He probably told them about the garden. He probably told them about the Day of Atonement. He probably told them about Christ on the cross and rising from the dead. He probably told them every bit of it. Now, they hadn't heard the story before, most of them. This was all new information to them. And some of them, we're told, some of them sneered or scoffed. They said, you got to be kidding me. Pfft, couldn't be. I don't believe that. God, that is so difficult for me because it was so amazingly abundantly true. But I find that many people who hear these stories over and over and over again do that exact thing. They hear the truth. I have told you guys before, and I just can't tell you enough, this is historically verifiable fact. It does not take a super genius to look at the facts from history and see that this is what happened. I know it's an amazing story. It's incredible. But Peter even said, we didn't follow cleverly invented stories. We told you what we saw with our own eyes. This is what happened. And yet, some of those people, some of the most brilliant minds in the world at that time, heard what Paul said and said, pfft. And I think that the reason they did that is actually because they're smarter than you and me. I think that the reason they sneered is not because they were too dumb to figure it out, but in fact because they were smart enough to realize that if they were going to accept this as true, it was going to change everything about them. You see, they had been building their lives based on certain premise, certain thought, and certain idea. And if they were going to believe what Paul said as true about the resurrection of Christ, then everything they had built their life on to this point was going to have to be set aside, and a whole new life was going to have to start. I think about Richard Dawkins. He is an evolutionary biologist, and the guy is, in many ways, very intelligent. He talked about how one day he was out in his garden, because British people don't have yards, they have gardens. So he's out in his garden, and he's looking around, and he sees the beauty of the trees, and he starts looking at the intricacy of the leaves. It's amazing stuff. And then he starts thinking about how those trees blossom, and how other creatures come and carry that pollen away, and just how amazing, how incredible the chances of that working like that are just astronomical. And then he starts thinking about the creatures, the bees and the other animals and the other insects, and how detailed and specific they are, and how if any one of them was missing any one element of their DNA, the whole animal wouldn't work, but somehow they work wonderfully. And then he started thinking about bigger animals like the squirrels that run through his garden and the rabbits that run through his garden, and how amazing they are. And he said to himself, it really makes me want to believe in a designer. Because I look at this and I say, there's no way all of this could have just happened. There's no way it could have just happened. Somebody brilliant, much more brilliant than me, so transcendent from this world, must have sat down and thought through this and designed it out and made this. This is just incredible. But, he said, I know that can't be true. Because I've given my life to evolutionary biology, and if I'm going to start believing that, I'm going to have to throw away everything I've ever done and start over. So I know that can't be true. That's what these people in Athens did. I hear what you're saying, Paul. I can see that it's fact, Paul. I can see the implications of believing that it's going to turn my life upside down. And I'm not willing to give up my struggle. I've been working my whole life to satisfy my own self. And now you're telling me that was a waste of time, and I can be satisfied by you, by Christ? I'm not willing to, I'm not giving that up. Some of them sneered. Some of them, and this is the one that really gets me the most, some of them said, this is really interesting, Paul. We'd like to hear you again on this subject. Most of the church people I've met, oh, maybe not you, but people I've met, are just like that. They hear the stories over and over again. They want to hear the stories. They're excited to come to church and hear the stories. They even want to teach Sunday school for little children because it's just so fantastic. It's just wonderful stuff. They love to hear the stories. Oh, they want to come on Easter Sunday morning and hear about Christ walking out from the grave because it's wonderful. It's so intriguing. It's so interesting. Oh, I'm going to come every week. I'm going to come next week and hear what he says next week. I might even take my Bible home and read it because this is cool. It's intriguing. It's interesting. And they want to hear it again and again and again because it tickles their fancy and it's wonderful to hear and it's so nice to think about. And the problem is these people say to themselves in their own mind that by sitting there and hearing the stories again and again and again, that's going to fill the hole in their heart. And that's not the truth. Jesus did not say, listen, if you want access to the kind of life I'm giving, well, then just let me tell you some Old Testament stories. Jesus did not say, if you want access to the kind of life that I am making available, make sure you're at church every week. He did not say, if you want access to the kind of life that I'm offering, make sure you follow all the rules and dress right and wear a tie when you preach and pray the right way for the right amount of time and read all those devotional books that the various places produce and teach Sunday school and be a really good church person, and tithe. Jesus did not say that. What Jesus said was, if you'd like to follow me, if you'd like to have the kind of life that I am making, it's really simple. He said, you must deny yourself and take up your cross. You must deny yourself. That doesn't mean like some of you this morning who are eating muffins said, I'm on a diet, I'm only going to have 3. I'll deny myself. That means you must say, I am no longer mine. I used to worship me. I used to satisfy me. I used to live for me, follow my rules, do things my way, make things work the way that I needed them to work. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to deny myself. I've told you before, it's a military or a civil term that means I'm going to give up citizenship in one country so that I can have citizenship in another. I'm going to deny myself. I am no longer a citizen of mine. I now belong to Him. But I know that when I do that, there's going to be a rebellion. The old me is going to say, no, I still want to be in charge, and there's going to be a battle. And so that old me must be crucified. I must take up the cross. Luke says daily, every day. Paul said every day I take up the cross. Every day I get down on my knees and I say, Lord, I don't want to be what I once was. I'm going to follow you now. If you want to follow me, interest is not enough. Signing up for Workday is not enough. Becoming a member, it's not enough. If you want to follow me out of the tomb of your existence, where you just whittle away trying to figure out ways to get out of there until finally your flesh dies and it's over and there is no relationship with God and you're never satisfied. If you want to get out of that, he says, you're going to have to come with me and leave the old self behind. But some of them, just a few, Luke names a couple, some of the people believed. I read for you this morning out of John chapter 20. John got down to that tomb and he looked inside and he saw the clothes lying there and he didn't understand it and it didn't make sense to him and he didn't have all the stories I have for you today because they hadn't been all put together in the same order yet. And he believed. He said, Jesus has risen. Peter struggled a bit though. Peter looked inside the tomb, and he saw that Jesus was gone, and he knew what had happened. But you see, Peter knew that if he believed, that meant that everything that he had done was going to have to change. Listen, he understood the truth of the situation, okay? He got the facts. Jesus had been crucified, Jesus was put in the tomb, Jesus is now out of the tomb, and he's alive again. He got the facts. All right? Later that day, he saw Jesus alive. The facts of the situation were intriguing to him, interesting to him. But he didn't yet believe. And the reason he didn't yet believe is because he didn't think he was good enough to believe. Because he heard in the back of his mind how Jesus had told them again and again and again, listen, when we get into Jerusalem, I'm going to be handed over to the Gentiles and they're going to beat me and kill me, but don't worry, on the third day I'll be alive again. Jesus had told them multiple times. He prepared Peter, but Peter wasn't listening. He wouldn't have any of that. No, Lord, that's not going to happen to you, he said to Jesus at one point. And then when push came to shove, and it was happening to Christ, Peter said, I don't want anything to do with that. That is not what I signed up for. I came because it was interesting, okay? I didn't come for a crucifixion. So he knew it happened. He had the facts. They were undeniable. But he didn't yet believe. Not until John 21, when Jesus met with Peter personally on a beach. And for every time that Peter had turned away, for every one of the denials that Peter had given to his knowledge of Christ, Jesus made sure that Peter knew that Jesus loved him deeply and that Jesus died for him, that Jesus gave his life for this man who was in the act of saying, I'm not interested. Jesus gave his life for him and said, Peter, are you ready now to leave behind the old life and follow me into a new life? You know why they were on the beach, by the way? Because Peter was fishing. He wasn't going fishing because it was his hobby. He was going fishing because that was the old life. Because before Peter met Jesus, he was a fisherman. And now that Peter felt like he had no more opportunity with Christ, he said, fine, I may as well just go be a fisherman again. I may as well go right back to where I started. Listen, this was really interesting. I had fun with it and all, but I may as well go right back to where I started and just be a fisherman again. But when Jesus come and said, Peter, come with me into new life, did you know from that moment on, there is absolutely nothing in history that says that Peter ever went fishing again. He left behind the old life, and that's how I know Peter believed. That when Jesus stood there and said, Peter, I love you so much that I died for you personally, Peter. Yes, I died for the sins of the whole world. And Peter, for you personally. So that when I rose from the grave, Peter, I could come get you personally and take you with me. And it's been a week, Peter, and you haven't come yet. Are you just interested? Are you just intrigued? Are you ready to sneer? Or are you going to come with me and believe? And from that moment on, the old life was gone. Peter no longer had to try to satisfy himself on a boat. He was fully satisfied by Christ. That's the story I want you to hear today. That's why I brought up Acts chapter 17. Because some of you have heard the story of the resurrection multiple times. And some of you have said, I don't think so. Oh, listen, not that you couldn't verify the history if you really wanted to. I mean, it's pretty easy. You can look it up. It's pretty easy. You can verify the history. You can know it's true. But you're not willing to take it any further than that because you know that the minute you verify the truth, you're in a bad spot. No, you're going to have to do something with it, and it's going to revolutionize your life. Many of you have said, no, I believe it. I believe it, and I find it amazingly interesting. So intriguing to me. And I can't wait to come next week and hear more. But that's all. But a few of you, well, hopefully most of all of you, have said, you know what? That's it. I am going to quit striving in my life to be good enough, to win the race, to satisfy myself, to have meaning. I'm going to quit striving to gain enough in whatever way, and I'm just going to follow him out of this mess and into a whole new life that starts the moment, like Peter, we say, okay, I'm leaving it behind and I'm going with him. That starts the minute that we truly believe and experience this whole new kind of life that I'm telling you is unlike, if you're one of those, it's unlike anything that you've ever experienced. And I'd like you to have that opportunity today. Now, you can go home if you want and look it up. I really would appreciate it if you did. You'll find out that Jesus is, in fact, alive. I mean, if you have any doubts about the history, if you want to know where to look, I'll point you in some areas. I mean, it's pretty clear. It's pretty obvious. And if you have any doubts about any of the stories that I told you out of the Bible, well, look them up. They're all there. I didn't make any of this stuff up. I just followed what I've seen. And if you have any doubts about new life, well, then ask one of us. It's pretty incredible what he can do for those who have surrendered themselves to him. So I want to give you a chance this morning, in a moment of quiet, to just consider it. Just think it over. Are you one who has sneered? Are you one who has, even now, is saying, yeah, I was kind of expecting this. If I come on Easter Sunday, he's going to pull this, whatever. No, are you one who has sneered and said, listen, it's not really, if I get right down to it in my own mind and in my own heart, it's not really that I struggle with understanding the concepts. It's just that I know what it'll do in my life. Just be honest about it. Are you one who has been intrigued for years and you keep coming back because, man, this is good stuff, this is fun, but you've never really let it impact your heart and change your life? And you're like Peter on the beach, wanting another chance. Or are you one who believes and who is walking with him and is so thankful? As you consider what it means that he walked out of that tomb, you're just overwhelmed with thanks. Let's take a moment and pray wherever you are. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you that you have called to us and moved in us in this way. I thank you that you are leading us into something bigger and better than we could ever imagine. You're leading us to life. We know that you have come to bring life and light, and we want to live in the light. So, Lord, I pray for these people this morning. I pray for the one who is a sneerer, the one who has for a long time just set it aside. Maybe they've just quit thinking about it because, well, they don't want to pay the price. They don't want to put that much effort into it. I pray that you would speak to them right now, right where they are, and let them know that it is not too late, that you have new life for them even now, and that it'll be beyond anything that they could ever imagine. And that you'll take the weight of the world off of their shoulders, and you'll give them freedom. Freedom to love you and freedom to love others. I pray that you'll speak to their heart even now. And for the ones who have been intrigued, Lord, I pray that you would lead them to take the next step. Lead them to surrender it all in belief. Oh, they know the stories, how they need to know you. And so I pray, Lord, that you would draw them to yourself and that they would come to you and call on you and ask that they would be set free. And for those who believe, Lord, I pray that you would fill them with such excitement that they would be living believers. How we thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.